The metallic click of handcuffs echoed across Millbrook Elementary's playground like a gunshot. Children's laughter died instantly, replaced by horrified gasps as 8-year-old Lila Martinez found her chubby wrists pinned behind her back, the cold steel biting into her soft skin. "Please, I didn't do anything wrong." Lila's voice cracked, tears streaming down her round cheeks as Karen Steinberg, the HOA's newly appointed community safety officer, tightened the restraints with practiced efficiency. "Big kids like you need to learn that size doesn't give you the right to bully others," Karen declared, her voice carrying across the stunned playground. 23 children stood frozen in place, their faces pale with shock. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly crossing guard, clutched her stop sign with trembling hands. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the swing sets and monkey bars. But the warmth couldn't penetrate the ice-cold atmosphere that had descended upon what moments before had been a scene of innocent play. Lila's purple backpack lay forgotten in the dirt, its unicorn keychain catching the light as she struggled against the metal restraints. "You can't do this to her," 7-year-old Marcus shouted from behind the slide, his small voice brave despite the tears in his eyes. "We were just playing tag." Karen whipped around, her perfectly manicured finger pointing accusingly at the boy. "Don't you dare question my authority. Young man, this girl was using her size to intimidate smaller children. I witnessed it myself." The lie hung in the air like poison. Lila had been doing nothing more than participating in a spirited game of freeze tag during afternoon recess, her infectious giggle drawing other children into the fun, despite her self-consciousness about her weight. She'd been having the best day she'd had in weeks, finally feeling accepted by her classmates after months of struggling to fit in at her new school. That morning had started so differently. Lila had bounded down the stairs of her family's modest duplex, her mother Maria already dressed in her hospital scrubs, preparing for another double shift as a pediatric nurse. The scent of fresh tortillas filled the kitchen, a small comfort ritual Maria maintained despite their hectic schedule since moving to Millbrook 6 months ago. "Mija, remember what we talked about," Maria had said, smoothing down Lila's unruly curls. "You're beautiful exactly as you are. Don't let anyone tell you different." Lila had nodded, stuffing her homework into her backpack alongside the lunch her mother had lovingly prepared. The move from Phoenix had been hard on both of them. Maria's brother Miguel had gotten them the duplex in his neighborhood, but the adjustment to suburban life felt overwhelming some days. The kids at school weren't mean exactly, but they weren't particularly welcoming either. Lila's weight made her an easy target for whispered comments and exclusion from games. But today had been different. During lunch, when Tommy Nakamura had dropped his apple and it rolled toward her table, Lila had picked it up and tossed it back with a grin. Instead of the usual awkward silence, Tommy had smiled back and asked if she wanted to play tag after lunch. For the first time since starting at Millbrook Elementary, Lila felt like she might actually belong. The game had been glorious. Children running and laughing. Lila's size actually working in her favor as she used her solid frame to help smaller kids up when they stumbled. Her cheeks had been flushed with joy and exertion, her usual shyness melting away in the warmth of acceptance. She'd even managed to tag speedy little Sophia Chen, earning cheers from the other players. That's when Karen Steinberg had appeared at the edge of the playground like a storm cloud. Karen had been watching from her pristine white Mercedes, parked strategically near the school's front entrance. At 42, she was the kind of woman who weaponized her appearance, her blonde hair always perfectly styled, her makeup applied with military precision. She'd moved to Millbrook 3 years ago after her divorce settlement provided her with enough money to buy the largest house in Oakwood Estates, the neighborhood's most exclusive development. The HOA position had fallen into her lap when the previous president, elderly Mr. Chen, had suffered a heart attack, Karen had swooped in with promises of elevated community standards and enhanced security measures. Within 6 months, she'd transformed the once friendly neighborhood into a surveillance state, complete with new rules about lawn height, acceptable paint colors, and appropriate outdoor activities. Her latest crusade involved what she called playground monitoring. She'd convinced the HOA board that unsupervised children posed a liability risk and had somehow gotten herself appointed as a volunteer safety officer. Complete with a badge she'd ordered online and a set of handcuffs she'd purchased for emergency situations. The truth was simpler and more sinister. Karen Steinberg was a woman who fed on power and control, and children were the easiest targets. She'd been looking for an opportunity to demonstrate her authority, and Lila's joyful participation in the tag game had triggered something dark in Karen's psyche. "I'm calling your parents," Karen announced, pulling out her phone with one hand while keeping the other firmly planted on Lila's shoulder. "This behavior is unacceptable." "My mom's at work," Lila whispered, shame flooding her voice. "She's saving people at the hospital." "Then she should have taught you better manners before she left," Karen snapped, her grip tightening. "Children who can't control themselves need real consequences." "Mrs. Henderson finally found her voice. "Ma'am, I don't think this is appropriate. She's just a little girl." Karen's head swiveled toward the crossing guard with predatory focus. "Are you questioning my judgment, Mrs. Henderson? Because I can have a word with Principal Morrison about whether someone your age should be working around children." The threat hit its mark. "Mrs. Henderson's face crumpled, but she took a step back, her job security trumping her moral compass. The other children watched in horror as their last potential ally retreated. Lila's world had collapsed in the span of 5 minutes. The acceptance she'd finally found evaporated, replaced by humiliation so profound it felt like drowning. Her classmates stared at her with a mixture of pity and fear, some backing away as if her presence might contaminate them with whatever trouble she'd supposedly caused. "I want my Uncle Miguel," Lila said through her tears, her voice barely audible. Karen's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Your uncle can't help you now, sweetheart. You're in the real world, where actions have consequences." What Karen didn't know was that Miguel Martinez wasn't just any uncle. At 38, he was the youngest chief of detectives in the city's history, a decorated 15-year veteran who'd earned his position through brilliant investigative work and an unwavering commitment to justice. He'd put away more criminals than most cops saw in their entire careers. But his greatest pride was being Uncle Miguel to his beloved niece. Miguel had been in the middle of reviewing case files when his phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Nakamura, Tommy's mother. She'd been picking up her son early for a dental appointment when she witnessed the scene on the playground. Her message was brief but urgent. "Something terrible happening at school. Woman handcuffed little Hispanic girl. Looks bad." Miguel's blood turned to ice. He knew exactly which little Hispanic girl Sarah meant. Lila was the light of his life, the reason he'd worked so hard to buy a house in the Millbrook district. After his sister's divorce, he'd made it his mission to provide stability for her and Lila, even if it meant stretching his budget to afford the duplex rental. He'd been following up on Sarah's text when his phone rang. This time it was Janet Chen, Sophia's grandmother, her voice shaking with outrage. "Miguel, you need to get to the school immediately. Some crazy woman has handcuffed your niece. The children are traumatized. This is not right." Miguel was already grabbing his keys and badge. "I'm on my way. Don't let anyone leave that playground until I get there." The drive from downtown to Millbrook Elementary normally took 25 minutes. Miguel made it in 12, his unmarked police cruiser weaving through traffic with practiced precision. Radio chatter filled the car, as he coordinated with dispatch, his mind racing through legal codes and protocols, while his heart screamed with paternal fury. Meanwhile, back at the playground, Karen was building her case against Lila with the methodical precision of someone who believed her own lies. She'd positioned herself as the playground savior, rescuing smaller children from the dangerous behavior of an oversized bully. You see how she was throwing her weight around, Karen explained to Mrs. Henderson, who stood several feet away with her arms crossed protectively over her chest. These children need to learn that physical intimidation won't be tolerated in our community. Lila sat on the bench where Karen had forced her, the handcuffs making it impossible to wipe away the tears that continued streaming down her face. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, each breath a struggle against the metal restraints. The other children maintained their distance, unsure of what to do or say. Tommy Nakamura, the boy who had invited Lila to play, stood near the swings with clenched fists. At 9 years old, he was small for his age, but fierce in his sense of justice. "She didn't do anything wrong," he shouted again, his voice cracking with emotion. "We asked her to play with us." Karen turned her cold gaze on him. "Young man, if you continue to disrupt this situation, I'll have to consider whether you were complicit in this bullying behavior. Is that what you want?" The threat was effective. Tommy's mother worked as a substitute teacher in the district, and any formal complaint could jeopardize her employment. He fell silent, but his eyes blazed with helpless anger. Sophia Chen, despite being only 7, possessed her grandmother's sharp intelligence and unwavering moral compass. She stepped forward, her small chin raised defiantly. "My grandma says lying is worse than anything we could do on this playground. And you're lying about Lila." Karen's face flushed red with fury. "How dare you speak to an adult that way? I think we need to have a conversation with your parents about respect." "My grandma's already coming," Sophia replied with the kind of calm confidence that only comes from knowing you're absolutely in the right. "She called the police too." For the first time, Karen looked uncertain. "The police? That's hardly necessary. This is a simple disciplinary matter." But doubt had crept into her voice. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts for Principal Morrison's number. If she could get the school administration on her side before any outside interference arrived, she could control the narrative. The sound of car doors slamming echoed across the playground. Miguel Martinez emerged from his unmarked cruiser like a force of nature, his 6-foot frame radiating the kind of authority that came from 15 years of dealing with the worst humanity had to offer. His badge gleamed in the afternoon sun, but it was his face that made everyone stop and stare. This wasn't just anger. This was the cold, calculated fury of a man who had dedicated his life to protecting the innocent. Behind him, Janet Chen hurried across the parking lot, her weathered face set in lines of determination. At 73, she'd survived the Cultural Revolution, raised 4 children through decades of discrimination, and built a successful restaurant from nothing. One entitled suburbanite with delusions of authority didn't intimidate her in the least. Lila. Miguel's voice carried across the playground, and his niece's head snapped up, hope flooding her tear-stained face. "Uncle Miguel," she called back, struggling against the handcuffs. "I didn't do anything wrong. I promise." Miguel's eyes took in the scene with professional assessment. Handcuffed child, traumatized witnesses, adult female with delusions of authority standing over his defenseless niece. His jaw clenched as he approached, each step measured and deliberate. Karen finally looked up from her phone, irritation clear in her voice. "Excuse me, sir, but this is a private matter. I'm handling a disciplinary situation." Miguel stopped 3 feet away from her, close enough that she had to crane her neck to meet his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, and absolutely terrifying in its calm precision. "I'm Chief of Detectives Miguel Martinez. That's my niece you've restrained. You have 30 seconds to explain why an 8-year-old child is in handcuffs." The color drained from Karen's face as the full implications hit her. Chief of Detectives. The badge wasn't just for show. This was real police authority. And she'd just criminally restrained a law enforcement officer's family member. She was bullying the other children," Karen stammered, her previous confidence evaporating. "Using her size to intimidate them. I had to maintain order." Miguel's eyes never left her face as he knelt beside Lila, his voice gentle as he addressed his niece. "Mija, are you hurt? Did she hurt you?" "The handcuffs are too tight," Lila whispered, fresh tears spilling over. "And everyone's staring at me. I just wanted to play tag." Miguel's expression darkened as he examined the restraints. They were indeed too tight, already leaving red marks on Lila's wrists. He looked up at Karen with the kind of stare that had broken hardened criminals. "Ma'am, I need to see your identification and any documentation that gives you the authority to restrain children." Karen fumbled for her purse, her hands shaking as she produced her driver's license and the fake badge she'd ordered online. Miguel examined both items with professional thoroughness, his silence more intimidating than any shouting could have been. "This badge has no legal authority," he said finally, holding up the cheap metal token. "You're not a police officer, security guard, or any other type of authorized law enforcement. What you've done here constitutes unlawful restraint of a minor, a felony in this state." Janet Chen had positioned herself near the group of children, her presence both comforting and protective. She'd been taking photos with her phone, documenting everything for potential legal proceedings. Her granddaughter Sophia stood beside her, still defiant despite the drama unfolding around her. "The children will testify," Janet said clearly, her accented English carrying absolute conviction. "They saw everything. This woman lied about what happened." Tommy Nakamura stepped forward, his fear overcome by the presence of real adult authority. "Sir, Lila didn't do anything wrong. She was helping kids up when they fell down. She was being nice to everyone." Other children began to find their voices, emboldened by Tommy's courage and Janet's protective presence. A chorus of young voices rose to defend Lila, each testimony another nail in Karen's coffin. "She shared her snacks with us. She helped me tie my shoe. She was laughing and having fun. We all were. She never hurt anybody." Miguel listened to each testimony with the same attention he gave to witness statements in major criminal cases. These children were telling the truth. Their accounts were consistent, detailed, and delivered with the kind of emotional honesty that couldn't be faked. He turned back to Karen, his voice taking on the official tone he used when making arrests. "Ma'am, I'm placing you under investigation for unlawful restraint of a minor, false imprisonment, and child endangerment. You have the right to remain silent." "Wait!" Karen's voice cracked with desperation. "This is all a misunderstanding. I was protecting the other children. I'm the HOA safety officer." "The HOA has no legal authority to restrain children or anyone else," Miguel replied, producing a handcuff key from his keychain. "Your neighborhood association position gives you no police powers whatsoever." As the handcuffs clicked open, Lila threw herself into her uncle's arms, her small body shaking with relief and residual trauma. Miguel held her close, his large hands gentle as he rubbed her wrists where the metal had left marks. "It's okay. Mija, you're safe now. Uncle Miguel's here." Karen made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. You don't understand children like her need discipline. She's too big, too aggressive. Someone has to maintain standards. The playground fell silent at her words. Even the younger children understood the ugly implications of what she'd just said. This wasn't about behavior or safety. This was about prejudice, pure and simple. Miguel's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "Ma'am, you just confessed to targeting my niece because of her physical appearance. That's discrimination, and it adds hate crime enhancement to the charges you're already facing." Janet Chen approached with her phone still recording. "I have video of everything, including her statements about the child's size. This evidence will be preserved." Principal Morrison chose that moment to arrive. Having received Karen's frantic call about a playground incident, he was a kind man in his 50s who'd devoted his career to elementary education. But he was also a political creature who understood the delicate balance between community relations and child welfare. "Chief Martinez," he said carefully, his eyes taking in the scene. "I understand there's been some kind of situation." Miguel stood, keeping one protective arm around Lila. "Principal Morrison, this woman unlawfully restrained one of your students during school hours on school property. I'm conducting a criminal investigation, and I'll need to interview staff members who may have witnessed the incident." The principal's face went pale as he realized the legal implications. A criminal incident on school grounds during school hours opened the district to massive liability. Mrs. Henderson, who had remained silent during the confrontation, now stepped forward with obvious relief at the arrival of legitimate authority. "I saw the whole thing," she said, her voice stronger now that she didn't face Karen's threats alone. "That woman threatened my job when I tried to intervene. The little girl was just playing with the other children." Karen's world was collapsing around her. The power and control she'd wielded so ruthlessly were evaporating in the face of real authority and genuine community solidarity. She looked around desperately for allies, but found only hostile faces and disappointed stares. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, her composure finally cracking completely. "I was maintaining order. These people don't understand what it takes to keep a community safe." Miguel pulled out his phone and made a call. "Dispatch, this is Chief Martinez. I need a unit at Millbrook Elementary for prisoner transport. Also, send a detective to begin evidence collection and witness interviews." The reality of criminal charges finally penetrated Karen's delusions. "You can't arrest me. I'm a pillar of this community. I own the largest house in Oakwood Estates." "Ma'am, your property ownership doesn't give you the right to commit crimes against children," Miguel replied with professional detachment. "You'll have the opportunity to explain your actions to a judge." As they waited for backup to arrive, the children gradually returned to some semblance of normalcy, though they remained close to Janet Chen and Principal Morrison. Lila stayed pressed against her uncle's side, her breathing finally returning to normal as the immediate danger passed. Tommy Nakamura approached hesitantly. "Lila, are you okay? I'm sorry I couldn't help more." Lila looked up at him with grateful eyes. "You did help. You stood up for me when everyone else was scared." Sophia Chen joined them, her small hand reaching out to touch Lila's arm. "My grandma says bullies always lose in the end. We just have to be brave enough to tell the truth." Other children began to gather around, forming a protective circle around their classmate. The cruel isolation Karen had tried to impose was breaking down, replaced by genuine solidarity and compassion. These children had witnessed injustice and seen it defeated by courage and truth. When the patrol units arrived, Miguel briefed the responding officers with professional efficiency. Karen was read her rights and placed under arrest, her protests growing weaker as the legal machinery ground into motion. The fake badge was confiscated as evidence, along with the handcuffs she'd used to restrain Lila. Detective Sarah Williams, Miguel's most trusted investigator, began the formal evidence collection process. She photographed Lila's wrists, documented the scene, and began taking detailed statements from witnesses. Janet Chen's video would be crucial evidence, but the children's testimonies would be equally powerful. As Karen was led away in handcuffs, she made one final attempt to justify her actions. "This isn't over. The community will hear about this. People will understand what I was trying to do." But her words fell on deaf ears. The community had already spoken through the voices of its children, and their verdict was unanimous. Justice had prevailed, and the playground would be safe again. The next few hours brought a parade of parents, investigators, and media attention as word of the incident spread. Miguel handled the official aspects with professional competence, while making sure Lila received the support and care she needed. Maria arrived from the hospital in a panic, still wearing her scrubs, and gathered her daughter in a fierce embrace. "Mija, I'm so sorry this happened to you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing at all." The investigation proceeded swiftly. Karen's actions were so clearly documented and witnessed that building a case was straightforward. The fake badge, the unauthorized restraint, the targeting of a child based on physical appearance, and the threats against Mrs. Henderson painted a picture of someone who had completely lost touch with reality and legal boundaries. Within 72 hours, Karen Steinberg faced a list of felony charges that could result in significant prison time. The HOA moved quickly to distance themselves from her actions, revoking her positions and launching their own internal investigation into how she'd been allowed to acquire such unchecked authority. But the real victory came in the days and weeks that followed. As the Millbrook Elementary community rallied around Lila and her family, the children who had witnessed the incident became powerful advocates for kindness and inclusion. Tommy Nakamura organized a playground friendship club that met during recess to make sure no child felt excluded or alone. Sophia Chen convinced her grandmother to visit the school and share stories about standing up to bullies and fighting for justice. Janet's tales of perseverance and courage resonated with children who had seen firsthand how important it was to speak truth to power. Mrs. Henderson, freed from Karen's threats, became a fierce protector of all the children in her care. She started a program teaching kids about appropriate adult behavior and when to seek help if they felt threatened or unsafe. Principal Morrison implemented new policies, ensuring that no unauthorized individuals could exercise disciplinary authority over students. The district also launched a comprehensive review of community volunteer programs to prevent similar incidents. For Lila, the trauma of that afternoon gradually gave way to a deeper sense of belonging and self-worth. The children who had defended her became genuine friends, and she discovered that her size and strength could be assets rather than sources of shame. She joined the school's peer mediation program, using her experience to help other children navigate conflicts and stand up to unfair treatment. Miguel watched his niece's transformation with pride and relief. The confident, joyful child who had been temporarily broken by Karen's cruelty emerged stronger and more resilient. She still had difficult days, but she now knew without question that she had people who would fight for her and a community that valued her exactly as she was. The legal proceedings moved forward with inexorable momentum. Karen's lawyers attempted various defenses, but the evidence was overwhelming, and the community support for Lila was unshakable. Video evidence, witness testimony, and Karen's own recorded statements made conviction virtually certain. In the end, Karen Steinberg received a sentence that reflected both the seriousness of her crimes and the community's determination to protect its children. She faced 2 years in prison, followed by probation and mandatory community service working with organizations that supported children with disabilities and differences. The HOA underwent a complete restructuring, implementing checks and balances to prevent any individual from wielding unchecked authority. New policies emphasized inclusivity, community support, and respect for all residents regardless of age, size, or background. As autumn turned to winter, and winter gave way to spring, the playground at Millbrook Elementary became a symbol of resilience and community strength. Children played with the kind of innocent joy that should never be threatened by adult prejudice or power-hungry individuals. Lila Martinez, now 9 years old and confident in her place within the community, often served as a playground mediator when conflicts arose. Her experience had taught her that fairness and kindness were more powerful than size or authority, and she used those lessons to help other children navigate their own challenges. On warm afternoons, when the sun cast long shadows across the swing sets and monkey bars, you could still hear the echo of children's laughter mixing with words of encouragement and inclusion. The playground had been transformed from a site of trauma into a testament to the power of standing up for what's right, even when you're small and scared. Uncle Miguel would sometimes stop by after work, watching from his car as Lila played with her friends. The sight of her genuine happiness and the sound of her uninhibited laughter were reminders that justice, when properly served, could heal even the deepest wounds and create something beautiful from the ashes of cruelty. The Millbrook Elementary Playground stood as proof that communities are strongest when they protect their most vulnerable members, and that the voices of children speaking truth can be more powerful than any badge or authority an adult might claim to possess. In the end, Karen Steinberg's attempt to demonstrate her power had accomplished the exact opposite of what she intended. Instead of creating fear and compliance, she had awakened a community's sense of justice and solidarity. Instead of silencing a child, she had given that child a voice that would inspire others for years to come. The handcuffs that had seemed so threatening on that autumn afternoon became symbols of something else. Entirely, the chains of prejudice and abuse of power could be broken when good people stood together, and that justice, though sometimes delayed, would always find a way to prevail.